Before steel, before engines, before any modern concept of machine, there's a scene that completely defies what one imagines about the ancient world. A gigantic block of stone, too heavy to be moved by human arms, begins to slowly rise from the ground. There are no explosions, no magic, no electricity. Only wood-thick ropes, simple gears, and focused men, coordinating each movement. It is a silent but powerful instant, where logic triumphs over brute force. It is precisely at this moment that it becomes clear that Rome did not become an empire solely through the sword or military conquest. It rose because it knew how to transform intelligence into real advantage, thought into dominion, engineering into power. Today you will discover how a single machine was able to multiply human strength to absurd levels, allowing a few men to accomplish feats that other civilizations never achieved, and how this silent invention helped to raise temples, aqueducts, and structures that still impress the world centuries later. For men stood silently, their feet firmly planted on the hard-packed earth, their calloused hands gripping thick ropes that creaked under tension. Before them, a block of stone that seemed to defy all human logic. It was too heavy, too large, too old. In any other civilization, it would have required dozens of bodies pushing, shouting, sweating to exhaustion. But there, in the very heart of Rome, something different happened. A signal was given. The wood creaked. The rope turned. And slowly, almost absurdly, the stone began to rise. Not by brute force, but by intelligence. Rome wasn't built solely on soldiers, battles, and conquests. It rose because someone understood, centuries before any industrial revolution, that winning wasn't about pushing harder, but about thinking better. While other peoples accepted the limits of their own bodies, the Romans decided to break those limits using engineering. And that's where the machine that would forever change the way the world lifted weights comes in. A crane that seemed simple at first glance, but was brutally efficient. If this scene has already begun to change the way you see the ancient world, pause for a second and be a part of it now. Write in the comments what impresses you most, the intelligence behind the machine or the fact that a few men could overcome tons of stone. Your comment helps the channel continue bringing stories like this, which almost no one tells in this way. Leave a like to show that this content deserves to reach more people and subscribe to the channel, because there are still many secrets of Roman engineering that seem impossible until you discover how they really worked. What makes this story fascinating is not just the object itself, but the invisible impact it caused. Imagine gigantic construction sites, temples springing up where before there was only earth, aqueducts crossing entire valleys, walls growing day by day. All this happening in a time without engines, without electricity, without modern steel. The question naturally arises in the mind of anyone who observes these constructions even today. How did they do it? The answer begins with a simple, almost humble idea. Pulleys, ropes, wood. Nothing that seems extraordinary at first glance. But the secret was never in the isolated materials, but rather in how they were combined. The system of compound pulleys used by the Romans allowed something that seemed impossible for any other people of the time: multiplying human strength. Each turn of the rope was not just a movement, it was a calculation. Each turn reduced the effort required and increased control over the load. For men, just 4, 2 on each side of the crane, chosen not for their strength, but for their coordination. By rotating the mechanism together, they could lift up to 3,000 kilos, 3 tons of stone rising from the ground as if defying the laws of nature. Now, pause for a second and try to imagine this happening before your eyes. Not in a modern laboratory, but in an ancient Rome covered in dust, noise, and manual labor. The shock intensifies when the comparison arises. In ancient Egypt, an admirable and monumental civilization, moving stone blocks required about 50 men to move 2 tons, 50 bodies to push, pull, and drag. In Rome, with this crane, a single operator could lift a load dozens of times greater than would be possible using only direct force. It wasn't just efficiency. It was silent technological humiliation. And just when you think that's the peak, Rome takes it to another level. The engineers realized there was still room for improvement. So they replaced the traditional winch with a larger diameter sprocket. A seemingly simple detail, but one that changed everything. The effect of this modification was brutal. With half the crew needed before, the load capacity doubled. Now, 6,000 kilograms could be lifted with control, precision, and less physical effort. This wasn't magic. It was pure mechanical advantage. The larger diameter of the wheel distributed force better, multiplying the impact of each human movement. The Romans weren't just lifting stones. They were raising the very concept of engineering to a new level. Each construction made it clear that the empire advanced not only by the sword, but by the mind. And if anyone today doubts that this actually happened, Rome left proof carved in stone itself. Reliefs preserved to this day show these cranes in operation. One of the best known appears on a tombstone of a plebeian family, something even more symbolic. It wasn't a technology restricted to the elite. It was part of the daily routine of Roman construction. The images show human figures operating the cogwheel, tension ropes, loads suspended in the air. This is not modern imagination. It is historical record. These reliefs not only document the machinery, but reveal something even deeper: the Roman mentality. For them, engineering was not a luxury, it was a necessity. Every building needed to be functional, durable, and quick to construct. Time mattered. Effort mattered. Efficiency mattered. And this explains why Rome managed to build so much in so many different places in such a short time. But the story doesn't end at 6 tons. Because Rome rarely accepted limits. When a challenge involved even heavier loads, gigantic columns, or blocks that surpassed any conventional crane, the engineers resorted to something even more impressive: wooden lifting towers. Enormous, rectangular structures, specifically designed to lift weights that could reach 100 tons. 100 tons. To visualize this, imagine an entire monumental column being slowly lifted, guided by capstans operated by men and even animals positioned around the tower. Everything synchronized. Everything calculated. A minimal error meant disaster. But still, these structures worked. And they worked well enough that temples, amphitheaters, and aqueducts arose on an almost absurd scale. If you've made it this far, comment now on what surprised you most about this story, and leave a like to show that this type of content deserves to continue. Your support makes all the difference in bringing more incredible stories like this one. That's why even today, when you look at Roman ruins scattered across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, the feeling is the same: awe. Not just because of the beauty, but because of the logic behind it. Nothing was done by chance. Every stone lifted carries the weight of an intelligent technical decision. And here, an inevitable reflection arises. Rome didn't win simply because it had more men or more territory. It won because it knew how to use less force to generate greater results. In a world where almost everything depended on the limits of human physicality, the Romans decided to break those limits with gears, pulleys, and reasoning. The content shows how Rome managed to erect some of the greatest constructions of the ancient world not through brute force, but through the intelligent use of engineering. The narrative explains how a Roman crane, based on compound pulley systems, allowed just 4 men to lift loads of up to 3 tons, something unthinkable for other civilizations of the time. The comparison with Egypt highlights the Roman technological leap, since previous methods required dozens of men to move smaller weights. Next, the text presents the evolution of this machine with the introduction of the toothed wheel, which multiplied the applied force and allowed the load capacity to be doubled, reaching 6 tons with fewer operators. The credibility of the use of this technology is reinforced by preserved Roman reliefs, which show the actual operation of cranes in the daily routine of construction sites. Finally, the content reveals even more advanced solutions, such as lifting towers capable of raising loads of up to 100 tons, demonstrating that the greatness of Rome was built on intelligence, calculation, and efficiency, and not just on military power. If this story made you look at Roman engineering in a new light, comment below what surprised you most: the fact that 4 men could lift tons, or the existence of towers capable of lifting 100 tons. Leave a like if this type of content captivates you from beginning to end, and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the secrets that allowed Rome to dominate the world not only with weapons, but with intelligence. Because there are still many Roman machines, strategies, and decisions that seem impossible until you understand how they worked. Until the next video.